came from Argentina, Buenos Aires, and is to tell us now about the ecological part of the astronomy.
Okay, well, thank you for having me here. Thank you, Susan. The idea is to share with you the general point of view of my work and share some thoughts about the complexity of relation among our database technologies and also the specific characteristic of the astronomers of the Southern Hemisphere, especially South America. And to start with this, my great formation is as an astronomer, and my PhD and master is an cultural anthropologist, and I work in the Argentinian Chaco from 1988, a lot of time. And with this experience, have some insights about this kind of relations with the sky. The perspective of my studies is anthropological survey and ethnography. We can talk about ethnoastronomy, thinking in ethnoastronomy as a perspective, a point of view about living cultures, but not only current living cultures, also past cultures as living cultures. We can use an ethnographic and anthropological perspective in documents and also in the archaeological record. It's not only about present living cultures. The idea of think about these cultures as living things, not as piece of in a museum. And have some specific characteristics, this kind of research, the holistic intention, the direct involvement with the subjects of your research, and the search of the deep logics of these systems, not only some stars and their names, some issues, specific issues of the culture, but the deep logics of these cultures. Also implies some kind of comparison and anthropological theory. And the basis of all this approach is the idea of our social character as species. We are social beings before being humans, because the species that are related with us are all socials. This means that our brains evolves not only to adapt to our environment, our physical environment, but also to our social environment. And our ideas about the world are deeply, deeply formed by these social characteristics of our thoughts. In this analysis of the social character of our knowledge of the world, the idea of cosmovisions or worldviews and also cosmologies are very important, but it's also important to use these two words separately. Now it's the fashions to talk about ontology, it's, theoretical fashions, but the problem if you use only one word to refer to all the levels of the knowledge in one society, you lose this difference about explicit theories about the world and implicit ideas about the world. And we prefer to use cosmovisions more, or worldview more, to this implicit knowledge, more general, like linked to the common sense in a society, and cosmology to talk about the more explicit theories that are grounded in cosmovision but are not the same. If you study contemporary societies, you need to think about modernity, because all these contemporary societies are living today. And if you study the society, you are not seeing through a window to the remote past. You are looking present societies. And if you take into account modernity seriously, you need to think in a very broad diversity of modernities. And also about the modernity as not a fact, but some kind of ideal or utopia that some societies try to reach. But it's a very broad group of goals. Also, you need to try to avoid centuries of colonial approaches to different cultures. It's not easy, not an easy task. We need to denaturalize our own assumptions about a lot of things. And we need to avoid these colonial first impressions and conceptualizations of the others. And for this, the anthropological tools of estrangement is very important to give us some perspective about this other culture from their own views. I'm working especially with the Mocoy people, the southwest part of the Argentinian Chaco. It's an original hunter and gatherers group that resist the colonial enterprise of the Spaniards from the beginning to the 19th century, and we are settled down by force by the expansion of the Argentinian national state in the last part of the 19th century, first part of the 20th century. They belong to a very big linguistic family, and now we are talking about 18,000 people. The Mocoid cosmos is a cosmos centered in the idea of power. The Mocoid thinks about the cosmos in terms of societies, not in terms of objects. For them, the cosmos is plenty of many kinds of societies, human and not human societies. And all these societies are related with each other among relations of power. And this power makes the form of the cosmos, the power of the societies that live inside the cosmos, give the texture, the quality of the cosmos. Different parts of this cosmos and important parts are, for example, the night sky, but also the dreams, the sickness, the past, and the forest, because all of these are time and space in which humans can reach contact with non-human beings, especially with powerful non-human beings. Also, the structure of the Mocoid cosmos is like a sponge with a lot of tunnels that connect many parts of the cosmos. The Milky Way is only one. It's the great highway of the cosmos, but it's not the only one. For example, these dust devils are also connections among parts of the cosmos, and connections that are moving. And are only once these connections because the shamans can see other tunnels moving that are not seen by other people. But, it's a very connected world. Also a world in which transformation, communication, motions are the crucial, the key notions. No non-essence definitions and objects. The stars, the moon, the sun, the things that happens in the sky are viewed as signs of the behavior of other social beings. Signs that you need to interpret to understand their intentions. And for this, it's very important to pay attention, not to predict, not to mechanically suppose what is next, but to understand the intentions of these beings. And for this reason, needs to be interpreted. And interpretations imply a political confrontations of opinions of different experts, especially elders. The exceptional unpredictability of some phenomena, but also some phenomena that are very regular, are signs of some intention, are not the usual things. And because of that, the people pay special attention to that. And you need to think in this kind of regularities, not as laws with this juridical metaphor that we use most of the time, but more that as a costume, as a habitus, as some kind of regularity in the behavior of these social beings. You can see the kind of skies, and for example, the people are very aware of this sky, also during the daytime. For example, this is a picture from an elder, a Mokoit elder, at the daytime, from memory of the night sky. You can see dark spots that forms the giant rear, and also clusters that are located in the borders or inside the Milky Way. The Milky Way is the structural axis of this cosmos. This is another cosmogram drawing, but this ancient elder, she dies at the age of 114 years. And she was a child during the last military repressions of the Mokoipe. Also, the children can draw this kind of cosmograms. Of course, things that simple that what's the night have different answers in different cultures. For example, for the Mokoid, the night, especially the twilights, the time after the sunset and the time before the sunrise are the perfect moments to see the sky. But you can't go outside in the middle of the night. This is so dangerous. You can't do it. You see the sky at these times, but also at different times, because this is a very social moment with many people together. And this is a very isolated moment in which people stay alone, especially elders, and are not the same kind of sky observation. The rest of the night, you go inside and be very careful to go outside, because this is a very powerful and dangerous time. Our problem when we try to study these things is we use our proper notions, that is natural, but it's a problem to study other notions. Especially, this is important when we talk about mythical tales, because we have some ideas about tales that are very configured by writing, but many of these are oral cultures. And orality and writing have very different mechanics, not only in the communication of ideas, but also in the production of ideas. For example, in writing, the words are objects, images. You can erase a word, but in orality, the words are sounds, are events, are something that happens, and you can erase it. You are talking with somebody and say this word that, this is not a correct word to say, but you can do nothing, only put more words in your speech. This is a very different kind of idea. Also, we can think about the authors in writing cultures as lonely people that thinks a lot and then write a book for the future. But in oral cultures, the production of knowledge is a social issue, because you talk with others. Imagine Socrates, he talks with his students' lives and don't pass 1 or 2 years thinking before you talk with the students. Some of the peculiarities of this kind of tales are, one, don't exist official versions, because don't exist any social institution that regulates that all people think one version of the tales. Also, don't imply a set of perfectly defined characters or episodes, are not isolated one tale from another. are part of a very big common resource. The important thing is that narrators build from blocks, more or less stable, within a very broad semantic field of possibilities that are provided by the common social cultural experience of the narrator and the listeners. And the bridge that the narrators makes from one block to the another are not by chance, but are not very specifically constructed. They can build new ones. Other important things is the recurrence of some elements or identifications in different situations and by different narrators that gives rise to some kind of series of stories that are usually linked one to each other, but are not like a canon. It's more like some regularity. And you don't have official versions, but you have people that have outright word talk about these kind of things. The idea is like these blocks are not the Levi-Straussian myths, but also are not artificial units that we put for analytical reasons. These blocks are more fuzzy defined in practice by the people, and you need to empirically found it in the orality of these particular people. And they have not a very rigid structure, but a diffuse limits. For example, in some occasion, seeing the Nashik or the Milky Way, the people can start to talk about the dark spots. And it's frequently that in this situation, the people talk about the Manik, the celestial rare. And for this, the people start to talk usually about Alpha and Beta Centauri, that they are the dogs, the Kyoho. And in talking about this, it's usual that the people talk about the origin of these dogs because it's natural. You talk about the dogs, you talk about the origin, and start to talk about the history of the brothers and the witch in the woods that give rise to the dogs. And in that kind of history, the siblings are identified with stars in Scorpio, and La Pilarachi, the Pleiades, is identified with the hunter that gives chase to the Manik. But in other situations, the people start to talk about the tale of the brothers and the witch because, for example, they are talking about the fire and the origin of fire. And they talk about this widow as Masarani, identify her with the Orion's belt, and talk about Kakare and the origin of fire, and identify Kakare with Antares of the Barana. But with this, they start with, in this chain, they talk about the brothers, the dogs, and the Nanaikalo, their enemy. And in this version of the history, the brothers are not stars in Scorpio. They are the Pleiades, and they chase the Manik. And this is perfectly well, and the same narrator can talk in both directions in different situations. We have variations and some background constants, and we need to identify in each case the variations and the constants. We don't talk a lot about this now, but the important thing is that to interpret these mythical stories, we need to think about the context. We need to think about the narrators. We need to think about what's the idea to talk about this myth in this moment. It's not a general interpretation. You need to understand the specific social institution that regulates knowledge in this specific social milieu. And I think this is important not only for these specific societies, but it's also important to take into account in other societies and not to project automatically our regulations institutions. In the same regions of the mocoid presence is the meteoritic dispersion of Campo de Cielo. It's a very known meteoritic dispersion, and it's known from a long time by European people, but before it's also known by Aboriginal people, mocoids included. We have a lot of ethnohistorical registrations of this knowledge. And also these meteorites are important today for the local people, and not only the local people. Many people are interested in these meteorites and stole many of them. This is one of the excavations to take one of these meteorites. But it's important to understand that for the mocoid people, these are very important objects from the sky that are body manifestations of heavenly beings and are landmarks of the territory and are the possibility of the fecundity of the land and very connected with the rain. This is our thing from the very old past as Wakani Nahni, falling stars. But for the Creole and foreigner population, these are objects to collect, in some cases of objects to sell. And for this reason, the mocoids see this extraction of meteorites from the ground as another form of colonialism. It's so important that in the first mocoid movie about mocoid people, in the title, you can see the meteorite. The title is the hiding nation in the meteorite. And these meteorites are so important today also for the Creole population that things that are miracle objects, and they try to stole many of them. And also two Buenos Aires Argentinian artists try to take one, the more important of these, to here to Germany to an artistic exhibition, and the people stopped this project, but you know, and now I are in the middle of a process of patrimonialization of this object that it's also very problematic, because the conflicts among museification and the mocoid experience of these objects. Now we are working in a project of training young mocoid people to be guides in this park and to talk with the tourists about their cultural values. It's a very complex problem, including the problem to define with young mocoid people and the elders which kind of stories talk to the tourism and which kind of stories don't talk to tourists. In a general way, to finish, South American groups' words have some important characteristics. One of them are these words are multiple and flexible and contextual. Many of them are social cosmos. For this reason, this cosmos needs to be interpreted by human beings. Also, communication and motion are crucial to understand this kind of cosmos. It's not only that Milky Way structure this cosmos, it's the motion of the Milky Way, the structure of this cosmos. Is motion more important and more fundamental than space or time for this kind of groups? Also, it's important the idea that these worlds are inhabited by many societies, and also the idea that the plurality is fundamental. Any units, the unit of the cosmos, the unit of the community, the unit of the human beings, the unit of the person, the human person, are at stake, are not granted. You need to build it every time. For this reason, the unity of the cosmos is the result of a constant work of all the beings inside the cosmos, including human beings. The human beings need to do a hard work to sustain the cosmos. For this reason, the identity of star names, star beings, asterisms, constellations is not obvious. Any unit in the sky is only a temporary unit, a unit in some time, in same context, for same reason, and not necessarily a unit forever. And I think these ideas are very important to take into account in the study of South American groups, but also tell us about the difficulties to project our own assumptions about the nature of our concepts of the cosmos in other cultures. On many occasions, this is easy because these other cultures are not present today. We can talk about their ideas from our perspective without any opposition. But in this case, it is especially important to take into account this kind of ethnographical experience, not because necessarily the Babylonians think like the Mocoet, because it's possible that the Babylonians don't think like us. And if we have a more broad spectrum of human experience and ideas about the cosmos, we have more chances to understand better the ideas of past societies also. Thank you very much.